Ladies and gentlemen, I have the legendary Brian O'Halloran with me, perhaps best known as Dante from the Clerks franchise. He's going to be right here in Chicago at ChronicCon in Rosemont, Illinois, this coming weekend. You better be watching this today because he's going to be here in 2 days. And looking forward to this weekend. What you've been doing the convention circuit pretty much since COVID ended. What is your favorite thing about touring, meeting the fans, and traveling with these people you've known for decades?
The one thing I really do love is, not only hanging out with the people I've been able to work with for many, many years, if not decades, but also seeing the fans, meeting, I'm fans of their work as well, meaning the other guests and other artisans that are at these conventions. There's people who make things that'll be there, like metalworking kind of artists and t-shirt sellers and, vendors who sell like vintage toys and stuff. And
is that where the collection behind you came from?
Yeah, kind of. There are little things going on here and there. But also, you get to talk to the other guests. I'll get to catch up with, people like Shannon Elizabeth and, Marilyn Gigliotti and people like Trevor Furman, who, I live on the East Coast. He lives out in the West Coast. So does Marilyn. So does Jay. So does Kevin. So it's always fun to get together in general and just catch up.
That is really damn cool. And I'm looking forward to it. This is the first convention I'm going to that you guys are going to be at. I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Marilyn about a month or so ago, and she was actually the one who tipped me off about it. I didn't know what was happening. So shout out to Marilyn Gigliotti.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So most recently, your character, Dante Hicks, was in the third and final Clerks movie, Clerks 3. So, spoiler alert, but the internet is a thing. Your character dies at the end of the movie. And famously, Kevin Smith was trying to kill off your character in the first movie, and there's a pointed reference to it in Clerks 3. So when you found out your character was going to die, did you look at the script and were like, really, Kevin, seriously, we're doing this again? Or what was your reaction?
Well, I mean, the first iteration of a Clerks 3 script was about 10 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago. And it was in a way that was very oddly sad, but yet heroic. A very different script, a very darker script. And the way that Dante passes in that is kind of in a violent way. So to see that the shock back then was a shock of, oh wow, we're bringing this element of the real world into the Clerks world. That was kind of weird and odd. And at that time I was like, wow, really? That's how he's going out, huh? But that script never got made. We were dealing with a producer that we didn't want to really work with anymore. And it just didn't feel like a Clerks-esque type of script in the vein that the fans, I think, would have wanted to see us be. Years ago,
I'm sorry to cut you up. Was this the one where you guys build the quick stop in the movie theater and then you had the kid?
Right. There was
okay.
What happened was Randall builds a quick stop outside of the movie theater for the world premiere of the movie Ranger Danger, which he decides to get in line literally like a year before its release. What had happened was, I believe Superstorm Sandy was the impetus for the store itself being destroyed. In real life, a lot of businesses got destroyed down in the New Jersey Shore, as well as people's houses, of course. So that was the basis of why the boys weren't back in the store again after owning it. And Dante had his own family going on at the same time. So yes, it was that scenario where we found those characters. This way, I thought was very funny. The idea of Randall making a movie that is pretty much Clerks. That was an idea Kevin had when we were making the Clerks cartoon back in 1999 and 2000 for ABC, that we made 6 episodes for. Only 2 made it to the air, but the other ones made it onto VHS and DVD, and then every once in a while, Adult Swim would play it on like Friday nights at 1 a.m. But that being said, it was going to be a small episode or two that Kevin was doing for the cartoon show. So the idea of wouldn't it be funny if it was this, the snake eating its own tail kind of full circle of these guys, these characters doing more. So when he came to us with this script, I was like, oh, wow, this is just a natural progression, but also funny how we're able to use ideas that we've had for years, if not decades ago, to be able to have fun with.
That's actually a perfect segue to my next question. The Clerks Animated Series, the DVD box set of which I'm probably bringing with me on Friday,
Right on.
has gained a hell of a cult following in the last 15, 20 years. It was very famously treated like shit by ABC, kind of discovered via DVDs and those Adult Swim airings. And now it's at a point where, like, in all of my View Askew Universe Facebook groups, I feel like every third post is just, who is driving? Oh my God, Bear is driving.
How can that be?
How can that be? What has your response been to the growing following for this, piece of television that you guys initially thought was just going to be forgotten?
That's the one project that I constantly badger Kevin about rebooting. I know we love the Jay and Silent Bob characters. I love them to death. But
Mm-hmm.
with this world where I go to conventions, as you know, as you stated earlier, a lot, I'm seeing the growth of animation, the actors who do the voiceovers, the artists who draw the animation, the creators who write for the animation, exploding, especially on the Comic-Con scene. It would be just a no-brainer for Hulu and Disney. Yeah, I'm talking to you guys. You guys, looking to make some profits for your shareholders, that group. You
It's
already
not even
own.
on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I know you own the property, but Hulu could do it. Hulu does a lot of edgy stuff. I know they brought in Justin Roiland to do his Solar Opposite shows and a couple of other shows. He had a bit of an issue with his own personal life that has been resolved, hopefully. But we were like set to say, hey, before we even made Clerks 3, Kevin had pitched the idea to Hulu going, hey, you guys own this property. The pre-production is already done from 20 years ago. If anything, it's a lot cheaper now because computer animation has gotten a hell of a lot cheaper to produce.
Mm-hmm.
The writing group that we had back then with Dave Mandel, famously known as a showrunner of Veep and many other shows, as well as like Seinfeld, he would be back on board. All of us, obviously, the original 4 to 8 people from the original series would be back on board. And I think it's a no-brainer for them because we could step all in and we don't even have to really rent actual studio space because everybody since COVID has gotten their own professional recording
Mm-hmm.
equipment. And, if you need to see me via Zoom to direct me, it's a no-brainer. If you talk to the people who are on current animated series now, they all do that. They all work from home. So there's not a lot of logistics involved when it comes to the technology today. So, I always tell the fans, you badger Hulu and Disney, badger them saying, hey, you guys have a property that's just literally not making you money and it can make you money. Even if it's very little money, the fans are out there to scoop it up.
Plus, in terms of marketing, one thing Kevin is really good at is just marketing his own shit.
Absolutely.
Nobody mobilizes his own audience like I've seen him. Even for the Clerk documentary, the one time I had the pleasure of meeting him was a couple of years ago at the Music Box Theater for the documentary about his life. And
Oh, Clark,
it,
yes, that was
yeah.
amazing. Malcolm Ingram is a fantastic filmmaker.
And if you look at my YouTube channel, you can actually see the question I asked him during the Q&A, which it was, I was telling somebody else about this recently. It was the last question of the night. The venue staff was already kind of annoyed with us for staying over our time. So I'm like, okay, I'm last in line. I have to ask him something. I'm going to ask him something really quick. So I said something along the lines of, what was your experience working with George Carlin in Jersey Girl? So this naturally leads to a 18-minute long oral history of his entire childhood being a fan and adulthood working with him. No regrets.
Nope. I've heard that story. I was on tour with him with the Clerks 3 screenings. Out of the 52 screenings in 48 cities, I was at 12 of them. And people would ask about George and St. George, as I like to call him. He was an amazing man. He played four-dimensional chess. He was on such a different level. Yeah, everybody says they've been saying this for the past, 6 years, 7 years, what George Carlin would think of the political environment today. But I think if you look at his previous work, you will know what he would think of today's political environment. I was very blessed to have gotten to meet him and work with him in Dogma when he played Cardinal Glick. And I have a book of his called Brain Droppings, which came out at the time when we were filming Dogma. And I brought it with me knowing that I was going to be working with him. And we were in the makeup trailer together. He was a chair down from me, and I was getting in done. He's like, "How you doing, young man? Where are you coming in from?" And I told him, "Actually, I'm originally from the Bronx, and he's born in the northern end of part of Manhattan, but went to school in the Bronx and stuff." And so we connected on that level. And I had him sign my book, in which he said, "From one Bronx boy to another." And back then, this is before digital cameras were around. When hair and makeup is done with you with wardrobe, they usually take a Polaroid for continuity in case they have to redo all this another day. And at the time, they had Polaroids that were the skinny kind for some reason.
Ooh.
And so he's like, "Would you like a photo?" So the makeup artist girl took a photo of the two of us together in me as, reporter Grant Hicks and him as Cardinal Glick outfit. And I have that as a bookmark of his book. It's one of my most prized possessions. I miss George.
That's amazing.
Almost on a daily. I see his stuff pop up in my Instagram feed and Twitter feed all the time because I follow numerous fan sites as well as his daughter's social media as well. And he was an amazing man in a very elevated thinker. And I hope I get to hang out with him again sometime.
Absolutely. Did you ever read the George Carlin letters, the scrapbook that he and his widow Sally Wade put together, or well, she put it together after he passed?
Right. No, I never got it. I've yet to get a chance to do that. I did see the documentary about him. That was really touching and tribute. And he was a troubled man with demons, as we all did, and maybe not the best of a parent at times or best of a husband at times. But he did what he could when he could, and he knew that to try to make a statement in this world, to try to somewhat show the absurdity of what goes on in the world that we just accept every day, is something that he was a man to easily spot to get it done. So I look forward to reading that book of collection of letters.
Oh, I definitely recommend it. I love Brain Droppings too, especially just the little. He would have killed it on Twitter, especially with those pages of just the one-liners.
Oh, exactly. I think he would have owned the internet. I wouldn't doubt that he would have had like 5 million followers on the internet. And he would have been brought on to every political pundit show there was. And as you can see now, like even CNN, Have I Got News for You, or The Daily Show, or any of these news-driven comedy shows, like John Oliver, he would have easily had a John Oliver like show or a Daily Show where everybody would be like, "Oh, tell us more, George."
Yeah, I think I remember Kevin saying that's how he met him initially, was like on the set of Conan O'Brien, because he was doing a political piece.
Right.
And yeah, that was kind of his home at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of your animated adventures as Dante, one thing I've always been curious about, on the 10th anniversary DVD, you guys did an animated version of the scene that didn't make it to the original Clerks that's alluded to in the movie, but it's for people who don't know, you and Randall go to an ex-girlfriend's funeral, shenanigans ensue, the casket tips over. It was, from what I understand, years later when you guys actually re-recorded that scene. What was it like stepping back into that role after so much time had passed and your life had been so much different, but you're working in the same story?
I remember when Kevin when we were first making the film in 1993, and I saw the scene as it was scripted, I was like, oh, wow, the funeral parlor is going to be a part of this. And he's like, we're hoping. And then it turned out that they were like, absolutely not. We would never be a part of this, have our name put on it, that type of thing. So instead, we just stole the shot. We literally just pulled up real quick. You guys just walk up to the front of the door. And then when I say action, you make it look like you're bolting out of there after the sound effects of and the sound of the casket knocked over. And then in the dialogue, obviously, in the scene where like, you knocked the casket over, it's explained as to why we were running out of there. So to 10 years later, here we are celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the release of the film. We able to get the good folks at Powerhouse Animation, who are the same people who do the He-Man series that Kevin show runs, as well as many other great animated series and games. Look them up. They were really great to step in and do a very similar style to the animated series that we did for Disney, of the actual funeral scene. We got Joey Lauren Adams to come in and do the voiceover again of Alyssa Jones.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah, and we got my girlfriend Diana Devlin played a voice in that as the mother, and I forget who else we got in as the voice of the father, and then obviously me and Jeff. And it was a fun, just quick kind of day of recording. And I remember Kevin was driving me. I had to fly out to LA for that. And me and my girlfriend, and I remember him driving us back home to the hotel that's when he broke the idea of like, hey man, I'm thinking about doing a Clerks 2. And I was like, oh, really? And it was at that moment that I knew that we were going to be doing a Clerks 2 and the basic idea of what he
nice.
had about it. So it was a great memory. It was nice to get back into a recording studio to voice the animated version of Dante, which is vocally slightly different than regular, me being on screen Dante.
Clerks 2 is quite possibly, and I might get a lot of shit from us Universe fans. It is quite possibly my favorite out of the trilogy. And part of it is just like the new direction he went in. I love what it represented, where it was the first time Kevin was really like mobilizing his audience during production and taking feedback and sharing updates. And for as much as Clerks 3 references the original, I kind of love how little Clerks 2 references the original. Going back to that scene, I think the one piece of dialogue directly referencing the events of the first movie was like, remember the night we went to Julie Dwyer's funeral,
Right.
which
Yeah.
was the scene that wasn't even in it.
Correct. So what's really funny is that Kevin loves to do that, to reference other pieces of the works of other films. That's why whenever I tell people who are introducing their kids or now grandkids to the series of movies of Kevin Smith, I always tell them, if you're going to do it, watch him in the order he makes the movies, because there are running jokes and references that if you skip and go back or vice versa, you're not going to get some of these hidden gems or Easter eggs of jokes or references or even visual jokes you'll see on set on things.
Oh yeah,
So
that death is the catalyst for what happens in Mallrats.
right. And so it's always fun to see new fans come in and go like, oh my God. And I see what you guys did there with such and such. So listen, if we can get back to doing the animated series again, and I'm looking at you, Hulu, you should definitely pick it up, and if you haven't seen it yet, catch it. I don't know if any streaming networks has it, because it's owned by Disney, and if Disney doesn't put it up, but some people throw it up on YouTube. You could always just try to find it as well on Amazon for purchase. Sometimes someone gets a crop of them that pop up. I know that they haven't re-released a pressing of it, so to speak, of the physical media. That's the great thing as well about our fan base. Our fan base loves owning physical media. They love it
Mm-hmm.
to have items signed. They love it because, as you can see, not everything gets onto streaming networks of our work. So it's always fun to just pop in. So I look forward to one day, hopefully sooner rather than later, we can go back to that breach. Now, look, Kevin has the right to do the animated series any way he wants again. He just can't do it in that style that we did for Disney. So if he wanted to do like a much more rougher animation, like a Rick and Morty or the Critic or Dr.
BoJack
Katz,
Horseman.
yeah, you could do it that way if he wanted to. So we'll see. I'll see him this weekend. I'll push it even more. But I assume the fans, like, that's the thing. Producers won't do something unless they know they'll get a return on their investment. And what they need is eyes on it, watching it, or streaming it, or buying it, or whatever. And that's where we turn to you guys, the fans.
Can I badger him about it on Friday and tell him, like, Brian
Please,
told me to tell you?
please, yes, yeah, and I'll back you up. I'm like, yeah, you tell him.
Fuck yeah. I So one of my favorite things to do on this podcast is basically crosstalk from other interviews.
Okay.
And so, like, if somebody brings something up and I talk to a related person in a following interview, I try to expound on it. And so when I talked to Marilyn back in August, we went into depth about the scene between Dante and Veronica in Clerks 3, where it's you guys in the car. And what I told her was my favorite thing about that scene is just the lack of exposition in the writing, but you can tell exactly what had happened.
Right.
Veronica's going through a divorce. She doesn't give you a lot of details about what happened. You guys have obviously spoken several times in the last 30 years. You have some kind of history between Clerks 1 and 3. And so what was your approach to that particular scene? Like, how did you play that going in?
As you said, there was definitely some sort of relationship via she would come into the store to buy something, or I'm sure the emails, we're in that world these days, or texts, just checking in how someone was, or hey, congratulations on owning the store, or something of that nature. But into that scene particularly, the scene starts off, obviously Jeff's character Randall had reached out to Veronica to say, hey, I need you to play you. I'm making a movie about our life. And obviously written about the 37 Dicks scene was part of it. And so thus she comes in all upset and all hopped up mad. But also, obviously, there's an underlying anger, and just because her own life is in turmoil. And for someone to come back, claw her back from a time when she was much more younger and disappointed in Dante, and finding out that this dude cheated on her, that kind of thing, to come back in that hot, fiery way was a great way to open up for fans, especially who knew how she was in the very first film, to be like, what's this craziness kind of a thing, to where she's so in the moment that she's like, it's not like you got a family, and not realizing what she's saying, knowing
Yeah.
that, Becky and his unborn child never got a chance. And then the humiliation of that, and running into the car to obviously just run away from the absolute appalling thing she just said. So that Dante, knowing that she didn't mean it that way, but going to her to go, look, I'm so sorry. You don't worry about me. I'm sorry about Randall. Had I known, it's just that moment of two human beings who've known each other 30 years, and not wanting to see someone hurt who you intimately cared for at least a small bit of time, if not a longer time, and could have been a future with. At the end, he's like, I do love her. But then she comes in and finds out that he had cheated with her. So when it came to that moment, and Marilyn's brilliant breaking down of the walls and breaking down of her own self, and saying that her life is not as fantastic as her, Range Rover and wonderful dental surgical practice is. People are regular people who get divorces and have kids and argue about, doctor bills or tuitions or whatever, that who's going to pay what. And this is my week, not my weekend, not your weekend. So knowing that that was her vulnerability, and she played it so vulnerable, I couldn't help but be compassionate, couldn't help but be sympathetic, couldn't be nothing more than a human being who was a friend. And the benefit of actually knowing Marilyn for 30 years and having this kind of being on the road kind of relationship, I can tell when she's got it and when she's on it, and I can tell when she's not feeling good. I could tell when she's upset in real life. Like, if we're on the road and her back is killing her, or she has neck issues, or she has carpal tunnel issues, I could tell, like, how you feeling today? Like, I genuinely care about Marilyn Gigliotti
Yeah,
as a person. So it's nice to have seen that moment, of vulnerability and comfort for Dante and Veronica. But then, of course, Kevin steps in as the writer for the fans and hits it with the funny punchline, where she says, "Hey, you wanna?" And then the next thing you know, the if the Range Rover is a rockin', don't come a knockin'.
absolutely. Yeah, it is Veronica in. I guess that means Dante is. But she mentioned that you guys were in a couple of plays together before Clerks even went into
True.
production. What was that like?
Oh, well, working in theater in general, I always love. I always tell people that live theater is like the gym for actors. That's where you really go and work out and flesh out characters to its fullest. You get to take a character from the beginning of a story all the way to the end in front of a live audience without stopping. There's no stop, wait, can I do it again when you're in front of a live audience? Plus, you get to feed off the energy. If it's a comedy, the laughter feeds you off. You're on a roll. If it's drama and you're hearing crying or gasps in the audience, you're on a roll. Plus, you could also change it up. If you didn't do something so good the night before, guess what? You get another show to do it again tomorrow night to do it. So I always love doing plays. Every once in a while, I like to get back to doing live theater. I haven't done a live theater since lockdown. But we did during lockdown have friends do exactly this, do readings of plays on Zoom where we'd give people the link and come and watch stuff, because I think it's always fun to keep your mind sharp by acting no matter what you do. So I get my fix these days from doing theater by doing stand up from time to time. It's in front of a live
Really?
audience. Yeah, it's in front of a live audience. It's a good 20 minutes or 30 minutes sometimes of just me going off or hosting. I'll host or MC comedy nights as well. It started out, actually, it bore out of doing Q&As at Comic Cons, where I've been told I'm very quick and funny on my feet. So that's where it all started from. And I
There
had
you
some
go.
friends like, yeah, have you ever done stand up? You should do stand up. And I was like, oh yeah. So I gave it a try. Now, look, I'm no George Carlin. Um, but I have a point of view and I think people enjoy it. So there you have it. But as far as theater, it's my first love when it comes to acting. Um, when any time I get a chance to have that type of time in my schedule to do it, I'd love to do it. Puppy.
I know they always try to make the podcast about themselves. I have two. The reason my arm has been down here is because he
Oh,
makes a point of interrupting every goddamn interview I did.
well,
He
what's their names?
This is Paulie. He is a Chihuahua lab mix of all
Oh,
things,
wow.
and this is Lulu, who is
Lulu.
she is a three-legged pit bull.
Oh, I have a three-legged cat.
Hey, tripod gang,
Tripods.
tripod,
Love them.
tripods for life. So I have a potentially dark question, and then I'm going to
Sure.
cap it off with a lighter question to end the interview.
Let's do it.
First thing, you and Jeff Anderson, who plays Randall,
Mhm.
you've known each other for a long time. Uh, Probably, in my opinion, your best acting and his best acting occur in the final third of Clerks 3.
Right on.
Yeah, that hospital scene, you in the movie theater. Uh, what were the vibes like between you and Jeff during production of your death scene?
Um, it was emotional, obviously. You know, Jeff doesn't like to take a lot of takes. He feels like, look, I have just a short amount of range of acting, which is a lie. But we kept it Very true. I mean, looking at each other, I felt his pain. He felt my pain. I tried to give him what he needed to get to where he needed to, and vice versa. Um, it's something that me and Jeff's chemistry, ever since I first met him at the first read through of the initial Clerks. He wasn't at my audition on the second night. I wasn't at his audition on the first night of auditions, nor was I, read with him for the callbacks. It was me and Kevin, and then it was me and Marilyn. So the first time I met him was for the first table read of the script. And ever since then, we just kind of clicked in that kind of rhythm, you know. We didn't hang out. I didn't, go to his house for beers and watch the game. We would always just work on the films, and then, a couple of years ago, he for the first time decided to come out on the convention circuit. But over the years, every time we've worked on the cartoon series, or we worked on the short film The Flying Car, or our cameos in Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back,
Mm.
or myself on Reboot. There's never been a time where we, for some reason, haven't clicked. So I always enjoy working with Jeff, and I'm glad. We saw that spark of a scene in Clerks 2 in the jail scene, where
Hmm.
that emotional connection between Dante and Randall, you can see how tight they really are and how they really do feel about each other. And Randall getting choked up where he's like, "Don't leave me, man." Um, that was that moment that sparked in Kevin's head, like, "Ooh, I'd love to have more of this in the Dante and Randall relationship." Thus, him keeping that for a Clerks 3, which, like I said, the first script was much darker and actually heavier when it came to emotions and acting. Um, but we did it again for this one, but left it for the hospital scene
I
and the
remember
store scene.
I remember hearing about that jail scene and how it was fine tuned, like at the literal last minute,
Hmm.
where it goes from, Randall realizing on the fly that they should buy the quick stop to he knew this whole time and he's been holding it in. And it was like Jeff's idea to rework the intentions. Were you in the room for that moment?
I wasn't in the room for that moment. I remember when Jeff went over to Kevin and was like, "I think maybe we need to," because we had seen what was written the first time for that jail scene. And I think Jeff's deep dive into Randall and wanting to, make it higher stakes, but also the emotional relationship between the two more believable and stronger, and something that I think the audience would, wow, grasp onto. So I'm glad that Jeff, because he's a writer as well, he wrote and directed his film, which came out at the same time as Clerks 2.
Oh yeah, now
Um,
you know.
yeah, so he is a director himself and a writer, and he knows about trying to get a character to its emotional, you know, uh, point that the writer wants to make. So the fact that the two of them fleshed it out. Listen, I'm a very flexible cat, and you want to change something up on me, that's fine. Let's do it. What do you need? I can give it to you. And so when they came back with what they had, I'm like, oh, okay, this is something that I think we can see what we can do with. And once again, Jeff did the work and very limited amount of takes. But once again, it came across and is one of the best scenes of Clerks 2, but also one of the best things that Jeff did to then push up the level of the emotion investment for the fans and for these characters to each other.
I love that. Uh, it's funny you bring up now you know Jeff's film because my final question: why isn't Trevor Furman in more things? Because other than Clerks 2 and 3, that's his only other credit. He was fucking hilarious. I remember telling the woman I was dating at the time a few years ago when we watched Clerks 2, I was like, this man could have been in every comedy for like 10
Absolutely.
years.
Absolutely. You know what it was? He was in college at the time when we were making
Uh,
Clerks 2. So
okay.
he wanted to finish his degree. He was also in a band at the time, so he was pursuing his music. And I think he just got burnt out. I mean, he worked on a lot of films. If you go to his IMDb, he's worked with a lot of people, TV shows, and stuff like that when he was younger. And he kind of burnt out on it.
Okay.
And it wasn't and you know he has a degree in he also has a degree in computer programming. So
Okay.
he's a programmer for a major corporation. He owns a company that created the Jay and Silent Bob Punch game, video game, Blunt
Oh,
Punch
damn.
video game. So he's in that world. And when Kevin asked him to be a part of three, or two, obviously, and then three, he was right on board with it. He loved the transition of the character, that it wouldn't be the same type of character that as we left him in at the final of Clerks 2. So that's something to ask him, because everybody has said that to him. Like,
Yeah.
you're quite funny. You're a really great character actor that you could pull off some really fun stuff. So when you see him this weekend, please let him know that as well. I've always been a fan of Trevor, a big fan of Austin as well. Austin Zager, who plays Blockchain in Clerks 3, who's now the lead in Kevin's new movie, the 4:30 movie. He's another cat who's another quirky young guy who can fit into very various roles. But he's got charm as well. He's very adorable.
I haven't seen the 4:30 movie yet. This is like the last weekend it's playing in theaters out here, so I need to catch it.
It is on demand. If you want to for the fans out there, you can go to your on demand
Oh,
of your local
absolutely.
cable device subscriber, Amazon as well. Go to Fandango to find out if it's still playing at your theater. Otherwise, if you're near the Jersey, New York City area, it is playing at Kevin's very own theater, Smod Castle Cinemas in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey.
Dude, I have never seen anything like it. Just bringing up movie theaters, because yeah, Fandango does do very limited screenings for Kevin's movies.
Right.
And my best friend Tom at the time, or currently my best friend, but we caught the final night of Clerks 3.
Oh, wow.
And dude, the way it was like a 100% 35 to 45-year-old male audience, all of us just like ugly crying at you lying in a bed. And it was one of those things where, like, I remember when the movie ended and we stayed for the credits and the lights came back up, all of us just kind of looked around like, what just happened?
You know what? That's great. I tell people, and especially when they see me at my booths at the Comic Cons, like, look, if you cried, you cared. If you didn't cry, you didn't care. And the fact that people have such a long term, especially if you were there and saw it in '94 or even later, got to this long-term relationship with the characters. I mean, listen, people did it when Tony Stark passed away. People did it when Han Solo or, Princess Leia. There are some characters that you've invested a lot of time into throughout many movies or TV episodes, that when they go, you're like, oh my God, they were like a friend to me, or, oh my God, I wanted so much more for them, that this is so sad that this is how it goes. But at the same time, we warned you from the very first film when we were talking about Empire Strikes Back. And that's what life is, a series of down endings. All Jedi had was a bunch of Muppets. We warned you that it was going to be a series of sad endings. So
it was in the text, you guys.
Yes, it was. Kevin was so on a third level of writing that he wrote it in his first script, and it didn't come to fruition until 30 years later in his third edition of the Clerks series, which you never know that Kevin. Yeah, I know. You never know that Kevin, he could probably pull out another Clerks somehow. I could see Randall seeing Dante as a vision of as a Force ghost. As long as I come back in Jedi robes and a Force ghost, I'm happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, right? He's there, it would arguably be no MCU without him having a cinematic universe first. So, like, if he adopted a multiverse, he'd have every right to, in my eyes.
Why not? Why not, I say? Especially, when our God is Alanis Morissette, who straightened things out in Dogma. So in the universe, supernatural things have happened at some point. So you never know.
And her song Everything plays at the end of Clerks too. That's something I was always curious about. It was like, is this Does Alanis Morissette also exist in the universe in which Alanis Morissette is God? Are they two separate entities?
Hmm. That's a quite a good question for Kevin this weekend at Chronicon. That's right, folks. You want to be there.
Oh,
Chronicon.
damn, you came prepared. All
Of
right.
course I did. You
I was
want
going to
everybody
add
like
that.
Shannon, Elizabeth, and Marilyn and Jay and Kevin's wife, Jen and Harley, like Genesis Rodriguez, the legendary. There'd be no Jay and Silent Bob without Tommy Chong and Cheech
I
Marin.
didn't
But
know
we have
Tommy Chong was going to be there.
Tommy Chong himself is going to be there. We got Raquel Castro, who is Gertie from Jersey Girl, Ming Chen, who's everywhere, and then Robert Kurtzman, who created the wonderful Tusk walrus for Kevin's movie Tusk. So definitely, you guys want to be there. The Hyatt Regency O'Hare. You literally could fly in from anywhere, take a quick shuttle bus over to the Hyatt, hang out for a day, and then fly back home. Flights to Chicago are cheap.
Absolutely. No one wants to come here. Take advantage of it while you can.